Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Eliphas Levi. This is Transcendental Magic, it's Doctrine and Ritual. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book where I teach you to do the things he is talking about, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual, with Part 2, Chapter 16, Witchcraft and Spells. What sorcerers and necromancers sought above all in their evocations of the impure spirit was that magnetic power which is in the possession of the true adept. I got that. But was desired by them only that they might shamefully abuse it. That is something you should definitely not do. There are repercussions according to the 8 laws of creation by which these things are judged. Now, I don't speak idly. If this is a brand new video for you, if you've never been here before, I have done things, right? I have used the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit, in order to heal myself in at least 3 ways, almost 4, right? If you're not familiar, I just had my leg broken April 28th. I am walking without a cane right now. Today is day 4 of July the 12th. And so I'm healing up rather well. I have used these magnetic power, right? And I give instructions. My book has instructions. The Esoterica Infinite Integrations playlist has instructions. If you join for a membership, you can have me read the book and give you the instructions. So if you would like to do that, by all means, the resources are readily available. But take it with a caveat that you should not be trying to shamefully abuse it. The folly of sorcerers was an easy evil folly, and one of their chief ends was the power of bewitchment or harmful influences. I will reiterate how you should not be doing those things, right? You should not be influencing anyone outside of yourself without consent, right? If you are bewitching someone, chances are you do not have consent, and therefore the 8 laws of creation say that you will get a response and that you will not like the response. You should not do any magical works outside of yourself without the absolute purest of intentions, and if you are dealing with someone else, express consent. Both of those things are intrinsically necessary in order to do these things effectively. Back to the text. We have set down in our doctrine what we think upon the subject of bewitchment and how it seems to us a dangerous and real power. That is true. See all of my warnings. The true magus bewitches without ceremonial. Let's hit that again. The true magus bewitches without ceremonial. Now, that is not just bewitchment. That is every single magical practice. We have gone through this entire book talking about how tools do absolutely nothing by themselves. Ceremonies and rituals are tools. They have no power unless you imbue them with power. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter who wrote it, doesn't matter how long it has been there. If you or the active agent are not imbuing it with power, then there is no power whatsoever contained within it. It has the potential to do things, but it has no ability to do anything on its own. And therefore, there is no magical practice by which you need a ceremony. You can have one if you so desire, and it helps you to keep your thoughts clear, but the ceremony is more of an allegory than it is a necessity for anything. And so the true magus does indeed bewitch without ceremonial. Now, that is without the negative connotations of bewitchment. And by his mere reprobation, those whom he condemns and considers it necessary to punish. The worst punishment that I ever give anyone is to ask God to give them exactly what they have coming, without me saying what it might be. His forgiveness even bewitches those who do him wrong. And never do the enemies of initiates carry far the impunity of their injustice. We have ourselves witnessed numerous examples of this fatal law. This is one of those things, right? My neighbor broke my leg, right? The one I was just talking about. He assaulted me for no reason. He had been up drinking all night. He thinks that I am the evil incarnate. My house existing is causing his to sink. It's not true in the slightest, but he has thoroughly convinced himself of that. He is a schizophrenic, refuses to take his meds. I don't hold animosity in my heart for my broken leg. I don't, right? I'm annoyed with the guy because he's constantly violating the borders of the property line. I'm annoyed with the guy because he assaults me, but I don't hate him. I don't bear no ill will to him. I want him to get exactly what God has coming to him. Whether that is beneficial or not, it's not up to me. But messing with me on that type of a level has repercussions. Maybe it's going to be legal. Maybe it's going to be financial. Maybe it's going to be emotional. Who knows? It's definitely going to be legal. He goes, 5 days? 5 days from now, he goes for his arraignment for breaking my leg. There are going to be some repercussions. But I also tell you all of the time that you can't cast a spell at me, right? You can try. I wouldn't. It's a horrible idea. I am shielded. Everything reverbs. If you try to cast something at me, it will absolutely come back at you, mirrored and multiplied. That is simply part of the process. Right? The enemies never carry far the impunity of their injustice. Anyone who attempts to do any energetic work in me will absolutely feel the reverberations. And it is just like, it's not a willful thing. I'm not trying to make it happen, but it will. It will happen. Be very careful if you attempt to do things. If you are so foolish as to attempt to, I don't know, curse an entire city, maybe there will be some rough implications for such an act. Maybe. Just possibly. We have ourselves witnessed numerous examples of this fatal law. The murderers of martyrs always perish miserably. That is a big statement, right? There is no way to verify this whatsoever. There is no way that you can be conclusive of this at all, right? There may be some legends attached by which you are pulling some references, but the murderers of martyrs always perish miserably is not true, right? That is a major assumption for a big word. Always perish miserably, and the adepts are martyrs of intelligence. Providence seems to scorn those who despise them and to slay those who would deprive them of life. The legend of the wandering Jew is the popular poetry of this arcanum. A wise man was driven by a nation to his doom. It bade him, "Go on," when he wished to rest for a moment. What is the consequence? A similar condemnation overtakes the nation itself. It is prescribed bodily. Men have cried to it, get on," for centuries, and it has found no pity and no repose. I am unfamiliar with this story, so I cannot add anything to it. A man of learning had a wife whom he loved wildly and passionately in the exaltation of his tenderness. He honored her with blind confidence and trusted her entirely. Vain of her beauty and understanding, this woman became jealous of her husband's superiority and began to hate him. Some time after, she deserted him, disgracing herself with an old, ugly, stupid, and immoral man. I think he may be talking about his own home life here. If you are familiar with the biography, it does seem to fit. This was the beginning of her punishment, but it did not end there. The man of learning solemnly pronounced the following sentence upon her: "I take back your understanding and your beauty." A year after, she was no longer recognized by those who had known her. She had lost her plumpness and reflected in her countenance the hideousness of her new affections. 3 years later, she was ugly. 7 years later, she was deranged. This happened in our own time, and we were acquainted with both persons. Again, that makes me think that he is talking about his child bride. The Magus condemns, after the manner of the skillful physician, and for this reason there is no appeal from his sentence when it has been pronounced against a guilty person. There are no ceremonies and no invocations. He simply abstains from eating at the same table, or if forced to do so, he neither accepts nor offers salt. Now, that salt is going to be binding if you believe it to be binding. But the bewitchments of sorcerers are of another kind, and may be compared to an actual poisoning of some current of astral light. They exalt their will by ceremonies till it becomes venomous at a distance. But, as we have observed in our doctrine, they more often expose themselves to be the first that are killed by their infernal machinery. Let us here stigmatize some of their guilty proceedings. They procure the hair or garments of the person they seek to extricate. They next select some animal which seems to them symbolic of the person, and by means of the hair or garments, they place it in a magnetic connection with him or her. They give it the same name and then slay it with one blow of the magic knife. They cut open the breast, tear out the heart, wrap it while still palpitating in the magnetized objects, and hourly, for the space of 3 days, they drive nails, red-hot pins, or long thorns therein, pronouncing maledictions upon the name of the bewitched person. That is a lot of energy investment, that is for sure. They are persuaded, and often rightly, that the victim of their infamous operations experiences as many tortures as if his own heart had been pierced at all points. He begins to waste away, and after a time dies of an unknown disease. Another bewitchment made use of in country places consists in consecration of nails to work of hatred by means of the stinking fumigations of Saturn and invocations of the evil genii. Then, following the footsteps of the person whom it is sought to torment, and nailing crosswise every imprint of his feet which can be traced upon the earth or sand. Could you imagine trying to do that? Follow somebody and drive nails into the ground where they walked? Right? Really? Yet another and more abominable practice. A fat toad is selected, it is baptized. The name and surname of the person to be accursed is given it. It is made to swallow a consecrated host, over which the formulae of execration has been pronounced. The animal is then wrapped in the magnetized optics, tied with the hairs of the victim, upon which the operator has previously spat, and buried at the threshold of the bewitched person's door, or at some point where he is obliged to pass daily. The elementary spirit of the toad will become a nightmare and vampire, haunting the dreams of the victim, unless, indeed, he should know how to send it back to the operator. So these are ceremonies, right? Whether they are valid or not, I don't know. I don't know where he pulled these references from, but something occurred to me yesterday. We've been doing this Eliphas Levi for a while, and I've noticed that he has shown several times that he was going back to the Catholic Church, and it occurred to me, what would be one of the most effective ways to make sure that somebody, or make sure that the control system maintained its control? If you had somebody who was acting possibly through subterfuge, pretending, so to speak, that he was relaying some information. He was giving you procedures and practices with no intention that they would actually work, that they would keep you from doing the actual practical beneficial things that are possible. And if that person had been consecrated, so to speak, to a church, and left the church, so to speak, with no intention whatsoever of ever actually leaving the church, but instead by casting aspersions upon the enemies of the church, I wonder if maybe that would be an effective strategy if someone of that nature would write a book and people would take it as an authority on how to do things that he is most emphatically not revealing. Would it cast doubt upon the practice? Would it reinforce the control system to which the person in question would eventually return? It's just something that I'm contemplating, something that I'm wondering about, because I do know that people do act with subterfuge at times. And from reading this book, right, from the words of Mr. Levi himself, it is quite apparent that he has no intention whatsoever of actually relaying the information that could be beneficial in the practice of these things. Right? This is once again, restrictive procedure, right? We've seen before precious metals, really hard to get things, right? But a fat toad that is baptized, all right? So you're already putting more energy into that control system, right? Why does it have to be baptized? Why does it have to adhere to the polar opposite of Christianity, right? Well, we do a proper baptism for these people who accept this blood sacrifice. And then on the opposite side where the shadows lie, they do a baptize too, right? Because it is a shadow of the control system, right? To swallow a consecrated host, again, is a reinforcement of that system, right? It has to be baptized. That's a reinforcement of the control system to which Mr. Levi was a part. To swallow a consecrated host, again, is putting power into that control system. That if you're doing this, you don't believe in. Not if you're doing it correctly, right? Not if you paid any attention whatsoever to what was written in the book. And so it just occurs to me that maybe what we're dealing with Mr. Levi is not just incompetence, because if this is not malicious, then it is incompetent. But maybe, just maybe, he was a sleeper agent for the Catholic Church, which would absolutely make sense. Back to the text. Now, let us pass now to bewitchments by waxen images. The sorcerers of the Middle Ages, eager to please by their sacrileges him whom they regarded as their master, mixed baptismal oil and the ashes of consecrated hosts with a modicum of wax. And again, apostate priests were never wanting to deliver them the treasures of the church. With the accursed wax, they formed an image as much as possible resembling the person whom they desired to bewitch. They clothed this image with garments similar to his. They administered to it the sacraments which he received. Then they called down upon its head all the maledictions which could express the hatred of the sorcerer, inflicting daily imaginary tortures upon it, so as to reach and torment by sympathy the person represented by the image. The bewitchment is more infallible if the hair, blood, and, above all, a tooth of the victim can be procured. It was this which gave rise to the proverbial saying. Now, I want to point out right now that if it has blood, hair, or a tooth, right, it is probably not aligned in the correct way. The proverbial saying, "You have a tooth against me." I've never heard that. There is also a bewitchment by the glance called the jettatura, or evil eye in Italy. During our civil wars, a shopkeeper had the misfortune to denounce one of his neighbors, who, after a period of detention, was set at liberty, but with his position lost. His sole vengeance was to pass twice daily the shop of the denouncer, whom he regarded fixedly, saluted, and went on. Some little time after, the shopkeeper, unable to bear the torment of this glance any longer, sold his goods at a loss and changed his neighborhood, leaving no address. In a word, he was ruined. That is as close to in a word as he has gotten so far. Right, it is one of my particular peccadillos. And if you say in a word, it should be in a word. And normally he says in a word and then he gives us a paragraph, so 3 words is better than that, I guess. A threat is a real bewitchment because it acts powerfully upon the imagination, above all, when the latter receives with facility the belief in an occult and unlimited power. The terrible menace of hell, that bewitchment of humanity during so many centuries, has created more nightmares, more nameless diseases, more furious madness than all the vices and all the excesses combined. Here is a wonderful time to point out that in the Old Testament there is no hell, right? There is zero references. There is no reference to you burning in hell eternally in the Bible or in the Old Testament. It is in the New Testament. They created it for the New Testament. But there was no heaven or hell in the Old Testament. There was only the land of the dead, to which everyone returned. There was no judgment waiting, not according to the Old Testament. The sacrifices were for now, not for then. Back to the text. This is what the Hermetic artists of the Middle Ages represented by the incredible and unheard of monsters which they carved at the doors of basilicas. The bewitchment by threat produces an effect altogether contrary to the intention of the operator when it is evidently a vain threat, when it does outrage to the legitimate pride of a menaced person, and consequently provokes his resistance, or, finally, when it is ridiculous by its atrocity. So, if you're giving a threat that you cannot carry out, it holds no power. The sectaries of hell have discredited heaven. Yeah, buddy, you got that power. Right, if heaven and hell were correct, hell could not discredit heaven. Say to a reasonable man that equilibrium is the law of motion in life, and that liberty, which is moral equilibrium, rests upon an eternal and immutable distinction between true and false, between good and bad. Tell him that, endowed as he is with free will, he must place himself by his works in the empire of truth and goodness, or relapse eternally, like the rock of Sisyphus, into the chaos of falsehood and evil. Then he will understand the doctrine, and if you term truth and goodness heaven, falsehood and evil hell, he will believe in your heaven and hell, over which the divine ideal rests calm, perfect, and inaccessible to either wrath, or offense, because he will understand that if in principle hell be eternal as liberty, it cannot, in fact, be more than a temporary agony for souls, because it is an expiation, and the idea of expiation necessarily supposes that of reparation and destruction of evil. That lends into the Catholic idea of purgatory. This much said, not with dogmatic intention, which is outside our providence, but to indicate the moral and reasonable remedy for the bewitchment of consciousnesses by the terrors of the life beyond. Let us speak of the means of escaping the baleful influences of human wrath. The first, among all, is to be reasonable and just, giving no opportunity or excuse to anger. A lawful indignation is greatly to be feared. Make haste, therefore, to acknowledge and expiate your faults. Should anger persist after that, then it certainly proceeds from vice. Seek to know what vice, and unite yourself strongly to the magnetic currents of the opposite virtue. If you would like to know how to balance your virtues and vices, I have a video on that, the 7 facets of God, and the manifestation video, both will tell you. The bewitchment will then have no further power upon you. Wash carefully the clothes which you have finished. Wash carefully the clothes which you have finished with before giving them away, otherwise burn them. Never use a garment which has belonged to an unknown person without purifying it by water, sulfur, and such aromatics as camphor, incense, ambergris, and etc. You can do this. There is no need to, right? Unless someone has specifically enchanted a garment in order to do malefiction, it's not going to have any effect. And even then, it's probably not going to have an effect if you were not the target. So, while you are perfectly welcome to do this ceremony, which is a tool, it is not a necessary ceremony at all. A great means of resisting bewitchment is not to fear it. It acts after the manner of contagious maladies. In times of epidemic, the terror-struck are the first to be attacked. The secret of not fearing an evil is not to think about it, and my advice is completely disinterested, since I give it in a book of magic, of which I am the author, when I strongly urge upon persons who are nervous, feeble, credulous, hysterical, superstitious devotees, foolish, without energy and without will, never to open a book of magic, and to close this one, if they have opened it, to turn a deaf ear to those who would talk of the occult sciences, to deride them, never to believe in them, and to drink water, as said the great Pantagruelist magician, the excellent cure of Muad'Dib. This is true, right? In times of epidemic, the terror-struck are the first to be attacked. Right? How many witches were burned in Salem? 0, right? They were the terror-struck, right? The hystericals. They were the first to be attacked in that particular instance. Right? The secret of not fearing an evil was not to think about it. If you do not lend the power to the evil, it cannot do anything to you. It's one of the reasons why it is not effective to attempt to attack me. Right? Besides my shielding and my grounding, that is a whole different thing. My advice is completely disinterested, since I give it in a book of magic of which I am the author. I completely disagree with. I think he is being disingenuous, at least. Right? He is not completely disinterested. He is the author of the book. I have given my understanding of that, right? But this discouragement, I absolutely agree with. Right? If you are of a nervous disposition, if you are feeble in body or mind, if you are credulous or tend to be hysterical, if you have deep abiding suspicions, if you are foolish, like any of this, right? Don't do it, right? I tell you many times that if you are not going to be dedicated enough to follow through with all of the things, it is better to not begin. Right? And that stands for my book too, right? Like the first 4 chapters, you can put into application, no problem. The last few chapters, you definitely need to take some advice if you are going to put them into action, right? I start them with warnings for a reason. As for the wise, and it is time that we turn to them after espousing the cause of the foolish, they have scarcely any sorceries to fear, save those of fortune. But seeing that they are priests and physicians, they may be called upon to cure the bewitched, and this should be their method of procedure. They must persuade a bewitched person to do some act of goodness to his bewitcher, render him some service which he cannot refuse, and lead him directly or otherwise to the communion of salt. A person who believes himself bewitched by the extrication and interment of the toad must carry about him a living toad in a horn box, or just not give it any power. Like, that is reinforcing the curse. For the bewitchment of the pierced heart, the afflicted individual must be made to eat a lamb's heart, seasoned with sage and onion, and to carry a talisman of Venus or of the moon in a satchel filled with camphor and salt. For bewitchment by the waxen figure, a more perfect figure must be made, as much as possible in the likeness of the person. 7 talismans must be hung round the neck. It must be set in the middle of a great pentacle, representing the pentagram. And it must, each day, be rubbed slightly with a mixture of oil and balm after reciting the conjuration of the 4 to turn aside the influence of elementary spirits. At the end of 7 days, the image must be burnt in consecrated fire, and one may rest assured that the figure fabricated by the bewitcher will, at the same moment, lose all of its virtue. All right, I don't often say this, but don't do this. Don't do this. Whatever you do, like if you believe that you have been bewitched by a voodoo doll, right, which is what this is, don't give power to that, right? Carrying around the toad is giving power to the curse of the toad. Don't create your own voodoo doll of yourself and imbue your own power and your own relics into it and then destroy it. I don't care if the fire is consecrated or not. Do not invest your energy into that. That is a remarkably bad idea. Mr. Levi is telling you something that is almost certainly going to bring harm into your life if you attempt it, do not do this. Do not do this. Back to the text. We have already mentioned the sympathetic medicine of Paracelsus, who medicated waxen limbs and operated upon the discharges of blood from wounds for the cure of the wounds themselves. This system permitted the employment of more than usually violent remedies, and its chief specifics were sublimate and vitriol. We believe that homeopathy is a reminiscence of the theories of Paracelsus and is a return to his wise practices. But we shall follow up this subject on a special treatise exclusively consecrated to occult medicine. Contracts by parents forestalling the future of their children are bewitchments, which cannot be too strongly condemned. Yeah, right? Forestalling means putting off the future of their children. What? Children dedicated in white, for example, scarcely ever prosper. Those who were formerly dedicated to celibacy fell commonly into debauch or ended in despair and madness. Man is not permitted to do violence to destiny, still less to impose bonds upon the lawful use of liberty. This is a natural outflow, right? Have you ever heard the term the pastor's kids, right? The pastor's kids are never good. They're almost always the bad kid. They're either the smoker, the drinker, the fornicator, the cursor, right? They are the one being the bad influence 90% of the time. If they are in the group, they are almost certainly not doing the thing that they are raised to do. And that is because of this, right? The same thing, formerly dedicated to celibacy, right? You have dedicated the parents dedicated their children's future to celibacy. Well, that's fucking dumb. You have taken upon yourself someone else's vows. I cannot even begin to think, right? Your children have lives of their own. They have their own hopes, desires, and dreams. To say that you would be able to guess that when they were a child? Are you kidding me? Now, you will naturally rebel against the bounds that are put upon you. And the reason why the pastor's kids are so bad is because the pastor demands so much. And so whenever they get a little bit of freedom, they're doing the exact opposite of whatever it is that they're getting hammered with. That is the law of response. As a supplement or appendix to this chapter, we will add a few words about mandragores and androids, which several writers on magic confound with the waxen images serving the purposes of bewitchment. Oh, we are talking about golems now. The natural mandragore is a filamentous root which more or less presents as a whole, either the figure of a man or that of the virile members, the penis. It is slightly narcotic, and an aphrodisiacal virtue was ascribed to it by the ancients, who represented it as being sought by Thessalonian sorcerers for the composition of philters. Is this root the umbilical vestige of our terrestrial origin? No. We dare not seriously affirm it, but all the same it is certain that man came out of the slime of the earth. That is not a certainty. And his first appearance must have been in the form of a rough sketch. That is much less of a certainty, right? If you go back to the earliest Homo sapien, right? Not Homo erectus, not any of the other variations, but Homo sapien. There is not a whole lot of physical difference between current and then, right? Now, there may be some nutritive things explained by nutrient deficiencies, right? 150 years ago, men were shorter. They had less stature. 5'10" was an extremely tall man, right? Now, 5'10" is pretty close to average. It's because of our nutrients. The fact that we are no longer facing starvation every single year has allowed us to grow bigger people. So there is some variation, but not a lot, right? If you go back 3,000 years, and you get a skeleton and you compare it to the skeleton of someone died yesterday. I mean, there's not going to be a whole lot that you can tell different between them. The diets change a little bit. The overall societal fat is good, fat is bad, right? Those things change. But for the most part, human has been the same. Evolution works on a micro level. It doesn't work on a macro level. We've talked before, and we're going to hit it real quick right here. There is no genetic imperative for a human to have lost hair. If we came from one of the simians or the great apes or whatever it happens to be this day, there is no biological imperative by which we removed the hair and replaced it with clothes, right? That's the opposite of the biological imperative. The hair guards us from the sun. It guards us from the cold, right? That is the biological imperative, to have the hair. There is no reason to lose the hair. And on top of that, suppose you have a pod of great apes, and one of them has a genetic mutation where he loses his hair and he becomes a human. He's not going to have sex with one of the apes. They're not going to reproduce another, right? There has to be at least two that has the same genetic mutation at the exact same time. And then if you want to achieve genetic diversity so that there is not inbreeding problems, then you're going to need significantly more than that. You're going to need a lot more than just two individuals getting the same mutation at the same time. If you're in this pod and you've got this one bald ape, there's no female's going to choose that. That is the opposite of the biological imperative. So it doesn't work on a macro level. Just from that, there are other evidences as well. Now, the micro level, it absolutely does, right? Variation in the species due to climate. That's melanin, right? That is the facial hair that we have, the eye structure that people have, the nasal cavities. All of those things are variation within the species over time due to climate without changing into a new species, right? We don't have, even today, any evidence whatsoever from one species turning into another one. Now, I have a theory about that, right? I believe that there was a cosmic event. Now, the scope of the cosmic event is up for debate. I believe it is part of the 12,000 year disaster cycle. But that there was this electromagnetic event that affected a large chunk of the Earth, maybe even the entirety of the planet at the same time, but at least one large spot, right? And all of these apes in this pod got radiated in the exact same way and mutated in the same way. Now you have a biological imperative. Now it makes sense for them to mate. It did not prior. And so all of that to say that man came out of the slime is up for debate. It is considered to be fairly firmly fixed, but I don't believe that. I just explained, at least to my understanding, a logical alternative to that theory. Back to the text. The analogies of nature make this notion necessarily admissible, at least as a possibility. The first men were, in this case, a family of gigantic, sensitive mandragores, animated by the sun, who rooted themselves up from the earth. Now, if there was this solar event, right, animated by the sun, creating this radioactive event that causes the mutation, right, we do know that you can get genetic mutations from radiation. Look at the wolves of Chernobyl. There are things happening over there. It is entirely possible that the gigantic radiation machine in the sky had an emission that caused us to be animated by the sun. Now, I personally don't believe that it came from a plant directly into humans. Right? I don't believe that. But it's not outside of the realm of possibility. It's just highly unlikely. There are the different levels of evolution, the theory of spiritual evolution. That is 3 removed from humans, and so it's going to be a problem, right? You can go from the smarter animals into humans, but you really are going to have a hard time going from the less intelligent animals into humans, much less from the plants all the way up to the human level. That's going to be hard. And that's not to say that it's impossible. I wasn't there, but it's definitely going to be hard. This assumption not only does not exclude, but on the contrary, positively supposes creative will and the providential cooperation of a first cause, which we have reason to call God. Now, for me, the electromagnetic variation that came, the solar event, that is directly from the will of God, probably for the purpose of mutation. Some alchemists, impressed by this idea, speculated on the culture of the mandragora and experimented in the artificial reproduction of a soil sufficiently fruitful and a sun sufficiently active to humanize the said root and thus create men without the concurrence of the female. Alright, we got to hit this now. They just did that. Right? This is a complete and total abomination. I am completely and totally condemning this action. But they just created a human from nothing but sperm. That is the thing that just happened. It's recent. Like in the last week, it's been in the news. I'm not sure where, but that I've seen multiple sources citing it. I didn't open it up because I find it to be an abomination, and I don't want to be associated with it. But they have done that, and it is probably going to have some severe repercussions. Others, who regarded humanity as the synthesis of animals, despaired about vitalizing the mandragora. But they crossed monstrous pairs and projected human seed into animal earth, only for the production of shameful crimes and barren deformities. All right, let's do this. We have talked before, and apparently we're going to have to talk again about how there is a law in Louisiana against bestiality, but it is quite specific. You cannot have sex with a sheep. You want to know why? Because you can impregnate a sheep. But that is the only animal that is excluded because it's the only animal that you can impregnate. Now, there are other laws dealing with just the general having sex with animals is a terrible thing. Don't do that. I absolutely reject in every single possible way the idea of having sex with animals. But people do it. In my high school, we had a guy got caught with a chicken and another one with a goat. But regardless, the sheep, you can do this. All the rest of the animals, it is going to be impossible, right? At least with the technology they had then. Today, we could probably genetically splice. As a matter of fact, they're probably doing that with swine. But you cannot impregnate, by the normal means, any other animal but a sheep, as far as I am aware. And, yeah. And so, it is possible that they were doing something with some projected human seed. The third method of making the android was by galvanic machinery. One of these almost intelligent automata was attributed to Albert Magnus, and it is said that St. Thomas destroyed it with one blow from a stick because he was perplexed by its answers. The story is an allegory. The android was primitive scholasticism, which was broken by the Summa of St. Thomas, the daring innovator who first substituted the absolute law of reason for arbitrary divinity, by formulating the axiom which we cannot repeat too often, since it comes from such a master. A thing is not just because God wills it, but God wills it because it is just. The real and serious android of the ancients was a secret which they kept hidden from all eyes, and Mesmer was the first who dared to divulge it. It was the extension of the will of the Magus into another body, organized and served by an elementary spirit. In more modern and intelligible terms, it was a magnetic subject. Once again, something that you absolutely should not be doing, right? The extension of the will of the Magus into another body, organized and served by an elementary spirit. You are causing a different spirit to take possession of a body is going to be terrible. Whether that is like you created the body, which is probably what is here, right? They created a will body or a clay body for the golem of the Jews. All right, that's what they're talking about here, is animating something that doesn't need animation. But that's going to bring us to the end of the chapter, and hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand that I have some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I have given clear instructions, right? The membership, you can hear me read those instructions. You can buy the book and get the instructions, or you can dig them out for yourself in the various playlists, right? Esoterica, the Infinite Integrations playlist, both have them. You just got to work for it, right? The book and the membership playlist, you don't have to work for it. You're paying for that privilege. But I'm giving the clearest instructions that I possibly can. Those instructions include: do not enforce your will upon anyone at all. No action on another person without consent. That even extends to healing, right? Unless, with very few exceptions, someone that you know would consent, and you are verifiably sure of that, then you can take that chance, right? And it is still a chance. Interfering with someone else's destiny and their free will has reverberations. You will feel the effects of that. The things that are outlined here, just like most of the other stuff, seems to be to keep you from that knowledge. The things that I tell you, right? The things that you can practically put into application. There's no gigantic ritual for anything that I've done. There's no ritual, right? Prayer, fasting, and meditation, they can become rituals if you allow them to, but that's not the intention of them. Everything that I've done has been prayer, fasting, and meditation, right? No tools are necessary. That includes all of the accoutrements, all of the stones, the wands, the athames, the bowls, none of that. I don't need any of the ceremonies, none of the inlays, none of the things that he describes. If you are doing works for yourself, it is about manipulating the electromagnetics of the spirit. It's not about calling upon an infernal or calling upon any entity, right? I don't deal with any of the entities. Everything I do is directly between me and God, and that is God the Infinite, right? Limited into the finite by the Spirit, so I work through the Spirit, but like, I'm not calling upon a name. I'm not asking for that. Now, I've opened myself up to these entities so that I can see if it's true. There have been no takers. There's been no approaches. It is what it is. I'm not going to lie about it. And so I don't know whether they are there or not. I've had an angelic encounter 25 years ago. I believe it. That to me is real, but I've never asked for an angel and had one appear. So take all of this with a grain of salt. I really do believe that he was writing this book in order to deceive. Right? The more I read of it, the more clear that becomes. The more it seems like he was really just a hidden agent. He was just doing the will of the Catholic Church, which is probably not a good thing to do. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was said, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there's another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner we are doing here, put that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book where I teach you how to do this the right way. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single thing, every single minute that you spend with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.